In this inaugural Raffles episode, we're introducing Raffles, the very first gentleman thief of English literature. E.W. Horning made Raffles a charming cricket-playing rogue who made his debut at the turn of the 20th century and quickly became a sensation. He was the quintessential well-mannered burglar, operating in elegant salons and shadowy corners of London. Horning crafted a character who wasn't just a criminal, but a gentleman. And that blend of sophistication and mischief made Raffles incredibly popular with readers of the time. What's fascinating is that for about 50 years after Raffles, no other real gentleman thief really captured the same iconic status until Cary Grant brought a similar kind of suave charm to the screen in 1955's To Catch a Thief. So there's this surprising little long gap between the two famous gentleman thieves. It's a little piece of literary and cinematic history that makes Raffles stand out all the more as the original. The Ides of March from The Amateur Cracksman. Author E.W. Horning, Ides of March. It was 12:30 when I returned to the Albany as a last desperate resort. The scene of my disaster was much as I had left it. The baccarat counters were still strewed the table with the empty glasses and the loaded ashtrays. A window had been opened to let the smoke out and was letting in the fog instead. Raffles himself had merely discarded his dining jacket for one of his innumerable blazers, yet he arched his eyebrows as though I had dragged him from his bed. "Forgotten something?" said he when he saw me on his mat. "No," I said, pushing past him without ceremony, and I led the way into his room with an impudence amazing to myself. "Not come back for your revenge, have you? Because I'm afraid I can't give it to you single-handed. I was sorry myself that the others..." We were face to face by his fireside, and I cut him short. "Raffles," said I, "you may well be surprised at my coming back in this way at this late hour. I hardly know you. I was never in your rooms before tonight. But I fagged for you at school, and you said you remembered me. Of course, there's no excuse, but will you listen to me for 2 minutes?" In my emotion, I had to first struggle for every word, but his face reassured me as I went on, and I was not mistaken in its expression. "Certainly, my dear man," said he. "As many minutes as you like. Have a Sullivan and sit down." And he handed me his silver cigarette case. "No," said I, finding a full voice as I shook my head. "No, I won't smoke. I won't sit down, thank you. Nor will you ask me to do either when you've heard what I have to say." "Really?" said he, lighting his own cigarette with one clear blue eye upon me. "How do you know?" "'Cause you'll probably show me the door," I cried bitterly, "and you'll be justified in doing it. But it's no use beating around the bush. You know I dropped over 200 just now." He nodded. "I hadn't the money in my pocket." "I remember. But I had my checkbook, and I wrote each of you a check at that desk." "Well?" "Not one of them was worth the paper it was written on, Raffles. I'm overdrawn already at my bank." "Surely only for the moment." "No. I have spent everything." "But somebody told me you were well off. I heard you had come in for money." "So I did, 3 years ago, and it's been my curse. Now it's all gone, every penny. Yes, I've been a fool. There never was nor will be such a fool as I've been. Isn't this enough for you? Why don't you turn me out?" He was walking up and down with a very long face instead. "Couldn't your people do anything?" he asked at length. "Thank God," I cried. "I have no people. I was an only child. I came in for everything there was. My one comfort is that they're gone and will never know." I cast myself into a chair and hid my face. Raffles continued to pace the rich carpet that was of a piece with everything else in the rooms. There was no variations in his soft and even footfalls. "You used to be a literary little cuss," he said at length. "Didn't you edit the mag before you left?" Anyway, I recollect fagging you to do my verses, and literature of all sorts is the very thing nowadays. Any fool can make a living at it. I shook my head. Any fool couldn't write off my debts, said I. Then you have a flat somewhere, he went on? Yes, in Mount Street. Well, what about the furniture? I laughed aloud in my misery. There's been a bill of sale on every stick for months. And at that, Raffles stood still, with raised eyebrows and stern eyes that I could meet the better now that he knew the worst. Then with a shrug, he resumed his walk, and for some minutes neither of us spoke. But in his handsome, unmoved face I read my fate and death warrant. And with every breath I cursed my folly and my cowardice in coming to him at all. Because he had been kind to me at school when he was a captain of the 11 and I was his fag. I had dared to look for kindness from him now because I was ruined and he rich enough to play cricket all summer and do nothing for the rest of the year. I had fatuously counted on his mercy, his sympathy, his help. Yes, I had even relied on him in my heart for all my outward diffidence and humility, and I was rightly served. There was a little of mercy as of sympathy in that curling nostril, that rigid jaw, that cold blue eye which never glanced my way. I caught up my hat. I blundered to my feet. I would have gone without a word, but Raffles stood between me and the door. Where are you going? He said. That's my business, I replied. I won't trouble you any more. Then how am I to help you? I didn't ask for your help. Then why come to me? Why indeed, I echoed. Will you let me pass? Not until you tell me where you're going and what you mean to do. Can't you guess? I cried. And for many seconds we stood staring in each other's eyes. Have you got the pluck, said he, breaking the spell in a tone so cynical that it brought my last drop of blood to the boil? You shall see, said I, as I stepped back and whipped a pistol from my overcoat pocket. Now you let me pass, or shall I do it here? The barrel touched my temple, and my thumb the trigger. Mad with excitement as I was, ruined, dishonored, and now fully determined to make an end to my misspent life, my only surprise this day is that I did not do so then and there. The despicable satisfaction of involving another in one man's destruction added its miserable appeal to my baser egoism, and had fear or horror flown to my companion's face, I shudder to think I might have died diabolically happy with that look for my last impious consolation. It was the look that came instead which held my hand. Neither fear nor horror were in it, only wonder, admiration, and such a measure of pleased expectancy as caused me, after all, to pocket my revolver with an oath. You devil, I said. I believe you wanted me to do it. Not quite, was the reply, made with a little start and a change of color that came too late. To tell you the truth, though, I half thought you meant it. I was never more fascinated in my life. I never dreamt you had such stuff in you, Bunny. No, I'm hanged if I let you go now, and you better not try that game again, for you won't catch me stand and look at on a second time. You must think of some way out of this mess. I had no idea you were a chap of that sort. There, let me have the gun. One of his hands fell kindly on my shoulder, while the other slipped in my overcoat pocket, and I suffered him to deprive me of my weapon without a murmur. Nor was this simply because Raffles had this subtle power of making himself irresistible at will. He was beyond comparison the most masterful man whom I've ever known, yet my acquiescence was due to more than mere subjection to the weaker nature to the stronger. The forlorn hope which had brought me to the Albany was turned as by magic into the almost staggering sense of safety. Raffles would help me after all. A.J. Raffles would be my friend. It was as though the whole world had come round suddenly to my side. So far, therefore, from resisting his action, I caught and clasped his hand with a fervor as uncontrollable as frenzy which had preceded it. God bless you, I cried. Forgive me for everything. I will tell you the truth. I did think you might help me in my extremity, though I well knew that I had no claim upon you. Still, for the old school's sake, the sake of old times, I thought you might give me another chance. If you wouldn't, I meant to blow my brains out, and will still if you change your mind. In truth, I feared that it was changing with his expression, even as I spoke, and in spite of his kindly tone and kindlier use of my old school nickname, his next words showed me my mistake. What a boy it is for jumping to conclusions. I have my vices, Bunny, but backing and filling is not one of them. Sit down, my good fellow, and have a cigarette and soothe your nerves. I insist. Whiskey. Whiskey? The worst thing for you, right? Here's some coffee that I was brewing when you came in. Now listen to me. You speak of another chance. What do you mean? Another chance at baccarat? Not if I know it. You think that the luck must turn, suppose it didn't. We should only have made bad worse. Now, no, my dear chap, you've plunged enough. Do you put yourself in my hands, or do you not? Very well, then you plunge no more, and I undertake not to present my check. Unfortunately, there are other men, and still more unfortunately, Bunny, I am as hard up at this moment as you are yourself. It was my turn to stare at Raffles. You? I vociferated. You hard up? How am I to sit here and believe that? Did I refuse to believe it of you? He returned, smiling. With your own experience, do you think that because a fellow has rooms in his place and belongs to a club or two and plays a little cricket, he must necessarily have a balance at the bank? I tell you, my dear man, that at this moment I'm as hard up as you ever were. I have nothing but my wits to live on. Absolutely nothing else. It was as necessary for me to win some money this evening as it was for you. We're in the same boat, Bunny. We better pull together. Together, I jumped at it. I'll do anything in this world for you, Raffles, I said. If you really mean that you won't give me away, think of anything you like and I'll do it. I was a desperate man when I came here, and I'm just as desperate now. I don't mind what I do if only I can get out of this without a scandal. Again, I see him leaning back in one of his luxurious chairs with which his room was furnished. I see his indolent, athletic figure, his pale, sharp, clean-shaven features, his curly black hair, his strong, unscrupulous mouth, and again I feel the clear beam of his wonderful eye, cold and luminous as a star, shining into my brain, sifting the very secrets of my heart. I wonder if you mean all that, he said at length. You do in your present mood, but who can back his mood to the last? Still, there's hope when a chap takes that tone. Now I think of it, too, you were a plucky little devil at school. You once did me rather a good turn, I recollect. Remember it, Bunny? Well, wait a bit, and perhaps I'll be able to do you a better one. Give me time to think. He got up, lit a fresh cigarette, and fell to pacing the room once more, but with a slower and more thoughtful step, and for a much longer period than before. Twice he stopped at my chair as though on the pure point of speaking, but each time he checked himself and resumed his stride in silence. Once he threw up the window, which he had shut some time since, and stood for some moments leaning out into the fog which filled the Albany courtyard. Meanwhile, a clock on the chimney-piece struck one, and one again for the half hour, without a word between us. Yet I not only kept my chair in patience, but I acquired an incongruous equanimity in that half hour. Insensibly, I had shifted my burden to the broad shoulders of this splendid friend, and my thoughts wandered with my eyes as the minutes passed. The room was the good-sized square one with the folding doors, the marble mantelpiece, and the gloomy, old-fashioned distinction peculiar to the Albany. It was charmingly furnished and arranged, with the right amount of negligence and the right amount of taste. What struck me most, however, was the absence of the usual insignia of a cricketer's den. Instead of in a conventional rack of war bats, a carved oak bookcase with every shelf in a litter, filled with better part of one wall. And where I looked for cricketing groups, I found reproductions of such works as Love and Death and The Blessed Damozel, in dusty frames and different parallels. The man might have been a minor poet instead of an athlete on the first water, but there had always been a first streak of aestheticism in his complex composition. Some of these very pictures I had myself dusted in a study at school, and they set me thinking of yet another of his many sides, and of the little incident to which he had referred. Everybody knows how largely the tone of public school depends on that of the 11, and the character of the captain of cricket in particular. And I have never heard it denied that A.J. Raffles' time our tone was good.